Guyana will become the next Dubai.
With wonderful people all over this country. She is a beauty, beautiful Guyana.
A very good evening to all our viewers, and we want to apologize for the late start. We had some technical issues getting on to one of the social media channels, but now we are back on. So we want to thank you for staying with us. And as we have a very interesting program tonight, we're speaking on foreign policy and diplomacy, international relations, and Guyana relationship with CARICOM and the global community. We want to thank Noir Singh for making this platform available. And tonight we have both Ryan Gobin and Devin Bissu as our technical specialists. Tonight we are very pleased to have with us Ambassador Bayney Karran. He is no stranger to us. So Ambassador, welcome to the program tonight.
Good evening, Charles. Good evening, Dr. Rose. Thank you for having me on the program, and greetings to all of your viewers in Guyana and across the world.
Thank you. And of course, my co-host, Dr. Rose. Dr. Rose, welcome.
Thank you, Charles, and welcome, Ambassador. It's a pleasure having you here tonight.
Ambassador, I know our topic tonight is foreign policy and diplomacy. Before I get into that, I know that you are one of very few Guyanese who are very accomplished. And that's not a facetious statement, it's genuine. As we know, you are in the media business, you're on the other side like us today, and you were very successful there. You went into the legal profession, very successful. You went into the diplomatic community, very successful, and now you're in oil and gas. So you're one of the few Guyanese who are really accomplished. So before we get into this program, the foreign policy, Ambassador, is the new petroleum bill that was just passed in Parliament. Were you able to brief your CNOC on the effect that this bill might have on your operation?
I advise CNOC mostly on issues having to do with corporate social responsibility, community affairs, and things of that nature. The question of advising them on the petroleum bill, although I used to be an attorney at law at one time, that is not within my scope of functions within the CNOC organization. They have special skimmed through the draft earlier. I haven't looked at the final bill. I have read one or two media articles on what it's about, but that's about it. I have to confess, I haven't been tracking it very closely.
I know as you know, the Vice President has been very clear, in my view, that he don't want Parliament to be running the oil and gas sector, which I think it's the right thing to do. Parliamentarians make the laws. But he also says that he wants an independent commission to run the oil and gas. But if you look through the bill, the minister seems to have overriding power in everything. How do we kind of correlate with the two and to say, well, on one hand, the government is saying they want an independent oil and gas industry, but on the other hand, the minister has all the authority.
Well, I've seen a report, I think it was in today's or yesterday's press, in which Vice President Jack Dale addressed that issue from the government point of view. And what he said was that there is going to be a petroleum commission in due time. I didn't see a reason, put forward as to why the commission is not in place as yet. But he did say that the commission will be in place. And he also said that the minister is not going to be functioning on his own. All of his decisions will have to pass the muster of cabinet. They'll have to be collectively approved. So this was offered as some sort of a barrier to capricious action by the individual who is currently authorized under the Act to make these decisions.
Yeah, and I'm not bashing our cabinet, but Ambassador, it was a cabinet decision that signed this oil deal that they gave the go-ahead. So on the one hand, our Vice President is saying that cabinet will give the overriding authority or approve that authority that the minister can take, but at the same time, the bill, and you're an attorney, the bill will take precedent, wouldn't it?
Well, it's the law. It's now a law. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So it's something that, but I'm please, if you don't mind, take some time and look at the bill and give us your view sometime as we invite you back into the future. So let's talk about foreign policy, Ambassador. We had Ambassador Shamir last week, and we spoke, and also we had Ambassador out of India, Ambassador Charandas. Are ambassadors generally on contract, or are they employed by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs on a regular employment contract?
Well, it can be either or. Generally, the ambassadors who have come through the ranks, who are professional diplomats and have worked there, the large part of their careers with the foreign ministry, they would be a part of the system. In case of if you're employed, if you're taken from outside the system and brought in, you're offered a contract. In my case, I was on year-to-year contracts for the entire 24 years I served as an ambassador. Each year I had a contract. It was an annual contract, renewed annually.
Is that a normal thing in the diplomatic service, in your view?
Well, different countries have different practices. In Guyana, I'm not too sure how the professional diplomats, whether they had contracts or not, over and above whatever their civil service arrangements were. But I know that all of those who were political appointees would have had to be put on contract, like myself.
Okay. And so the contract ambassadors, they will not get a pension when you're no more ambassador. You get your gratuity after every 6 months, I believe.
No, you can get a pension. There was a law passed for the members of parliament and I think other high functionaries of the state, and ambassadors were included in that. So you are entitled to a pension based on your salary that you earned. That would be the Guyana dollar salary that you would have earned as a civil servant. You receive a pension on that salary.
But that's for the regular ambassadors, not the contracted ones like you were. Is that correct?
No, The contracted ones are included, or can be
Oh,
included if they so wish. Yeah.
oh, I see. So the contracted ambassadors or the high commissioner, they get a gratuity every 6 months, or the case may be. In addition to that, they can qualify for a pension after they serve a number of years. And in your case, you'd have served almost half your working life as a diplomat. So in your case, you might also have a pension in addition to the gratuity.
That's correct.
Okay. Dr. Rose?
Okay, Ambassador, you were ambassador for 3 countries, I think, for 24 years. Venezuela, United States, and China. So you've been in the diplomatic service for a number of years. Can you explain to our audience why every country has a department or a Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and what is diplomacy actually?
Well, diplomacy is necessary in order to conduct relations with other members of the international community, with other nation states, with other international organizations. Every country, or even before we had the world was organized according to nation states, when there were, principalities, even going into more ancient formations when you would have lived in clans or whatever. You had to have relations with your neighbors. You had to have defense. You had to have trade. You'd have had to have exchange of, educational developments and whatnot. So this is just a logical outgrowth of human interaction. And so you need to conduct all of these matters in order to survive, to enhance the life of your population in so many, many different ways. And the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is the principal instrument by which these affairs are conducted. So each country would have a Ministry of Foreign Affairs organized in some form or fashion according to its own laws and preferences.
Ambassador, our consulate is different from an ambassador position like you have in the United States, in Washington, in New York. How the two are different? What are the difference?
Okay, so a consulate can be located in any part of the country in which it is operating. It can be in any city, or it can be accredited, like a place like the United States, it can be accredited to any state, any of the 50 states, or in any large city. So that's a good example you've given with Washington and New York. We have it in other places. In Brazil, for example, we have an embassy in Brasilia, but we have a consulate also in Boa Vista, which is the capital of Roraima State, the nearest state to Guyana. So consulates generally look after consular matters, that is the interest of the population that's located there. They may process documents. Some consulates have the authority to issue passports and issue visas. There are different types of consulates. There are honorary consulates, in which case they don't have that kind of authority, but they would do low-level things like look after the delegation that's passing through, or they might do some educational promotion or cultural exchange activity or something like that. A more advanced consulate, like we have in New York, is called a general consulate, because they have a lot of powers, a lot of authorities to do things like issue passports. So the head of our consulate there, for example, Ambassador Brotherson. His title is Consul General because he's the consul of a general consulate. The honorary consulates are not necessarily are usually not someone from your own country. They're a member of the elite of the society of which they live in. So while they might serve Guyana, our honorary consulate in Greece, for example, would be headed by a national of that country. And these are typically persons who are well connected in the society, who do not depend on you for a payment or salary, but they would be able to represent your interests, promote business, and so on. And they would be, what they would get from it would be the prestige of being a member of the diplomatic corps in that country and being able to use those connections for their own benefit in their own social and business circles and so on. The principal difference between an embassy and consulate is that the embassy always is located in the capital of the country. There can only be one embassy in a country, but there can be many consulates in that country. And only the embassy is located in the capital city. The consulates can be located anywhere else. The embassy is the institution that conducts state-to-state relations and government-to-government relations. The consulate does a much lower level type of work and cannot engage in state-to-state activities. Those are some of the principal.
Okay, Ambassador, you have spent 7 years in Venezuela. Can you tell us then about the Venezuela-Guyana border dispute or the Venezuelan? Okay, go ahead.
Well, so I got to Venezuela a year before the election of President Hugo Chavez. I actually presented credentials to his predecessor, Rafael Caldera. When Chavez came to power, he was initially quite aggressive on the issue of the claim. He subsequently mellowed, and part of the reason for that is because Guyana had gone to another country that was mutually friendly to Guyana and to Venezuela. And we had asked the leadership of that country to ask Chavez to calm down a little bit, which he did to a certain extent. He modified his stance. You might recall that at one point, Guyana was trying to establish an aerospace launching pad in the northwest, near to the Venezuelan border, a company by the name of Beale Aerospace from Texas. And Chavez was up in arms about it. He was very angry. He thought it was going to be some kind of a threat to Venezuela because of the relationship they had with the United States, and this was an American company. So that was a manifestation of how hostile he was on the issue. After, when he had calmed down, Chavez actually came to Guyana and he announced that this whole thing of the claim was just an American plot to destabilize the communist government of Cheddi Jagan in the 1960s and so on. When he got back to Venezuela, he sort of backtracked on that a little bit, but the relationship still improved and improved greatly. So that when Venezuela launched PetroCaribe under Chavez, which was a facility to give countries in the region, fuel on concessionary terms and allow them to pay in commodities, Guyana was actually able to buy fuel from Venezuela in exchange for rice, which was something that I think that at the time had a very positive effect on our rice industry, not to mention on our balance of payments. So the relationship did improve greatly under him. After Chavez died and President Maduro came to office, things made a turn. By then, Venezuela had gone through some very serious problems internally. The oil price had fallen. The revolution had started to unravel. Maduro had a lot less clout, a lot less wiggle room, and he was personally much more beholden to the army, to the armed forces of Venezuela. And so he took a much more, aggressive stance, which persists to this day, by the way. So we have been able during that period of time to maneuver the issue, to get the Secretary General of the United Nations to take the matter, to get the International Court of Justice to hear the matter, and it's there right now. So this is where the matter is in a sort of a legal standoff with Venezuela. But, I should point out that Venezuela is a country, is an expansionist power. Venezuela has a territorial claim not only against Guyana, it has a territorial claim against Colombia on the western side.
Yeah.
They have, Venezuela has been able to browbeat the small island state of Dominica to get them to acknowledge Venezuelan sovereignty over Bird Island, which is a rock in the ocean. And this has given Venezuela the basis to lay claim to thousands and thousands of square miles of maritime territory and the resources in that territory. As long ago as 1945, when the end of the World War II was in sight and the unraveling of the British Empire was imminent, there were voices in Caracas who were clamoring for Trinidad and Tobago to be part of Venezuela, on the basis that in ancient geological times there was a land bridge. Trinidad and Venezuela were connected by a land bridge way back in prehistory, and so this is an example of the expansionist ambitions of Venezuela. I mean, if we are to go about redrawing the map of the world on the basis of where ancient land bridges lay, you can see what that's going to do to the map of the world. So some of these positions are really preposterous that Venezuela has been taking. We have been very nimble, Guyana, in the last 60 years. The claim that Venezuela now maintains, which they revived 60 years ago, was the same claim basically that they had since the 1830s against Guyana, which was settled. In 1899, there was a judicial process. Venezuela's claim was virtually, it was dealt with legally by a tribunal. But they accepted that for 60 years. And now they have revived the same claim and brought it. And we have been able to do two things. One, to take it to the ICJ, as I said earlier. And secondly, we have played our bat close to the pad on this issue. We have been nimble at the crease, and we have been, although we're a much weaker power than Venezuela, have actually been able to ensure that we have not lost any territory to Venezuela over the past 60 years, or any territory of note. So, given Venezuela's behavior, given their attitude to territorial issues, they are unlikely to accept the outcome of the decision of the ICJ, which, I think that everyone in Guyana expects an inevitable victory for Guyana in that court case. And so Venezuela is likely to reject that ruling whenever it comes. And we will just have to keep on doing what we're doing, which is to safeguard our territorial integrity. The ruling may give Venezuela some pause. They may recalibrate and come back in some different form or fashion. Maybe less aggressively or more aggressively, we don't know. But they're likely to reject that decision, in my view.
I agree with that. What are the relationship between Guyana and Venezuela today?
Well, I am not in the service anymore, but they're not good. They're not good. When I left Venezuela, after the improvement in relations, it had reached a point where Venezuela had felt that the relations were in such good terms. I was actually awarded a very high national award, the Order of the Liberator in the first class, by the government of Venezuela, for what they saw as my role in improving the relationship. If you have you contrast that with the vote at the United Nations, where Guyana went up to be a member of the Security Council, I think over 180 countries cast a vote, and every single country, except one, voted for Guyana to become a member of the Security Council. So you have the entire world declaring by that vote that Guyana is a country in whom they would entrust the judgment and the wisdom to carry on the affairs of their represent them in a proper manner before the highest decision-making forum in international policy on the planet. But one country did not vote for Guyana, they abstained, and that country was Venezuela. So that says everything about where the relationship is right now and what is Venezuela's attitude to Guyana. It has deteriorated, and we have seen in very recent times, we have seen the Venezuelan Navy seizing ships that do not belong to Guyana, but are taking part in work in the oil industry, seizing ships and towing them to Caracas, and this sort of thing. These are acts of force that are not acceptable, really, in the international community in today's world. But Venezuela perpetrates them against Guyana.
Yeah, you're right. 191 countries out of 192 voted for Guyana to become a member of the United Nations, a non-voting member of the United Nations Security Council. Venezuela abstained. Charles, over to you.
Ambassador, in your experience, staying with Venezuela for a minute, who is really pushing this land expansionist? Is it the government, the military? What are your views on that? Is there any political opposition or political movement in Venezuela who are more sympathetic to the Guyana side than to Venezuela, in your view?
Well, Charles, the information I would have on that issue is quite dated, because I left Venezuela a long time ago in 2003. But from all indications, it's not a one-dimensional project that Venezuela has. The government has, it has a position on the matter. Every government in Venezuela has the same position. If you're going up for elections in Venezuela to be elected president, you usually start off by saying, look, the other guy before me, he didn't get back Essequibo for you. Elect me, I will do it. So it's a political issue in Venezuela. In addition to that, the current opposition in Venezuela is probably even more strident than the government is on the Essequibo claim. And then you have the question of the army. Virtually every officer who, has to write a thesis to become an officer in the army, they would write a thesis on how to reclaim Essequibo. And then you have quite a few organizations in Venezuela who are dedicated to what they call revindicate the claim and reclaim Essequibo. They're very busy online. If you take a check, you'll see them. They send messages all the time. They're active in a lot of areas. They're lobbying Google to redraw maps and things like that. We've had to deal with as well. So it's not just one sector. The Venezuelan, Venezuelans educate their children to believe that the Essequibo is administered by the government of Venezuela, and that the people who live there are, linguistically and culturally Venezuelan. That's what the average child in Venezuela believes. That's what they've been taught in school.
Interesting. I know at one time they were giving passports, I believe, to the people who live in from Puerto Rico going all the way down to the Essequibo coast and so on. Do you know if that's still happening or that has stopped?
Well, I don't know if it's still happening, but I don't think it was a very successful policy. What they did was if you had entered Venezuela illegally and you were from Essequibo, they had offered you, documentation, Venezuelan documentation, Venezuelan nationality. I'm not sure that everyone took it up. I think a very small minority of Guyanese took advantage of that. And we can see now where Venezuela is in desperate economic circumstances, and lots of the descendants of Guyanese who had gone over to Venezuela are now returning. So it's not a policy that was successful. That policy that Venezuela tried to implement, it was not successful.
What would you think of the Guyana being a welcoming country for a lot of Venezuelan refugees? Is that something that might be a benefit to Guyana in your view?
Well, I think that migration is always a positive thing because migration serves the purpose of rectifying imbalances in either in markets, in labor markets, and so on. You look at any society where there has been migration, you see that society has benefited. Prime example is the United States. It's a nation of migrants. So are we, by the way. I mean, depending on how far back you want to go. You need to worry more about when people do not want to come to your country rather than when they want to come to your country, because if you have nothing to offer, then you're in a bad situation. So that's one point of view. I know there are other points of view on that about people coming, taking your resources, not contributing, bringing crime and all, things like that. But I think that Guyanese, given the fact that we ourselves are a migrant people, so many of us have left these shores, and we have found a niche or found a haven in other countries where we've been welcomed. We should hardly be the ones to turn people away. In addition to that, there are international norms and international regulations that Guyana has subscribed to about how to treat, destitute persons who turn up at your border, and there are certain things you're mandated to, you're obliged to offer. And I think Guyana is doing this. I think we're being more generous than we have to, but I think it's a good thing.
And you said it right, Ambassador, because at one time when Guyanese were leaving in large numbers to Venezuela, now they're coming back home because Guyana is getting better. Do you see when the sanctions are lifted in Venezuela, that some of the Venezuelans might also go back to their country, or what is your view on that?
I think that's a question of how deep they will have put roots down in Guyana by then. It's all a question of where is the opportunity more attractive, here or there, and the longer you stay in one place, the deeper your roots tend to sink, and then uprooting and going back becomes more difficult, which is what happened with a lot of our people who went abroad.
And the Guyanese came back from Venezuela only because of the sanction that hit them. If not, they would have most likely stayed there as well. But Ambassador, what is your view, or what should our government do to strengthen our hand should Venezuela not accept the ruling of the ICJ? That is, of course, as we all expect, that they will rule in Guyana's favor. What should the government of Guyana continue to do if they're not doing it?
Well, we have to do what we've been doing, continue doing what we've been doing. I think Guyana has put its best diplomats out there on this issue. We have mobilized opinion in the region with CARICOM, with the Commonwealth. We have lobbied the countries that lobbied countries. We need to get countries to support us, and we need them to make it clear to Venezuela that any kind of hostile or actions not in consonance with international law are not going to be countenanced. We're a very small country. We cannot challenge Venezuela militarily. We can only do so by diplomacy, and we have been consistent in our position that we would like this matter to be settled in accordance with international law. The fact of going to the International Court of Justice to seek a resolution, by which Venezuela is supposed to be bound, by the way, is itself an expression of that policy. And this is what Guyana does. It's the same thing we did in the case of Suriname when we went to the United Nations Tribunal on the National Tribunal on the Law of the Sea in order to demarcate the maritime boundary after Suriname invaded our 2000 and evicted an oil rig from the CGX company that was about to drill for oil, in our waters. So this is a consistent policy, and this is what we need to do. We need to keep mobilizing international support and opinion on, keep educating our local population on the issue, and hope that will stay Venezuela's hand.
Is there, Ambassador, anything that Guyana should do that we're not doing, in your view?
No, just more of the same. Just more of the same. I think we can do a better job of educating our own population. I'm not too sure how informed young people in Guyana are on this issue, how mobilized they are on the nature of the threat. It's an existential threat to Guyana's existence. And I think that we can probably do more of educating people internationally on the issue as well, especially in Latin America and in the hemisphere. But I think that generally, like I said earlier, I think we've done a good job of keeping Venezuela at bay.
And I think of recent, the president visited China. I'm sure that would have come up as well. And China being one of the superpowers, and they do have some control of Venezuela. Hopefully that will also play a great part in Venezuela tempering their response should the ICJ rule in Guyana's favor, which we all expect. Ambassador, getting back to the Caribbean, and you talk about CARICOM. This is about the second time that Prime Minister Rowley has said some disparaging statement about Guyana. And I think the Vice President did respond in both cases. What are your views on Prime Minister Rowley's statement on Guyana?
Actually, I was not really following that issue. I saw Mr. Rowley make some reference to Guyana dollar.
Yeah.
He was told something by one of his constituents that had nothing to do with Guyana or nothing to do with currency.
That's correct.
It was about an election in Trinidad. So I thought he was completely out of place. I thought it was an unsuitable remark. But I have not seen the response by Vice President Jack Dale. I heard that he gave some response, so I'm not in a position to comment on that. But I do think that that Mr. Rowley was completely out of turn. He spoke completely out of turn on that matter.
But what bothers me, Ambassador, is that no CARICOM here in the chair of CARICOM didn't rebuke Prime Minister Rowley for his statement.
Well, they probably thought it was not an issue in which they should get involved, or who knows, somebody might have spoken to him quietly. Not everything happens, you know, in the media, you know, and in front of a microphone. You know, there could have been some talk behind the scenes. We don't know, but you know, I think everyone would in CARICOM, the other leaders would want to ensure the issue doesn't blow up, you know, doesn't gain much more traction than it has at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's a good tip. Diplomat, that's a perfect answer. Dr. Rose? I think Ryan, we're getting feedback. Ambassador, you're getting feedback from me?
No.
Okay, so it's my side. Dr. Rose?
Yes. Ambassador. In the 1960s and 70s. Oh my God. Yes. Guyana a foreign policy based on the line.
One sec.
Why we get echo?
One sec. Checking it.
Yeah, we're getting an echo right.
You can go ahead now.
Yes. Guyana a foreign policy based on alignment. Is the same there.
Ryan, the feedback is still there. Sorry, audience, we get this today.
Yeah, we still fixing on it.
Go on, Dr. Rose.
Yes. So that foreign policy. We're having the same echoing? Same thing.
Yeah, Ryan, are we getting it correctly? Ambassador, we're so sorry. Getting this.
No trouble.
All right, give us one sec. Mr. Ambassador.
Yes.
Can you please rejoin?
Oh, is Ambassador side?
Most likely.
Okay. Yeah, you hearing me, Dr. Rose? Yeah, where is the ambassador? Yeah. Dr. Rose, are you hearing me?
I'm hearing you, yes.
Okay, we can continue discussion,
Are
but
you
Ambassador
there?
coming back on. Yeah, I think he's back on now. Yeah, Ambassador is there.
Ambassador,
Yeah, go on,
you're
Dr.
back?
Rose. Yeah.
Yes. So Guyana's on alignment with, and it went on in the 1990s. But President Ali met with the two most powerful leaders in the world. That's President Joe Biden and President Jinping from China. And he's maintained that Guyana will remain a neutral country and will support the United Nations, the laws established by the UN and international law. So do you think Guyana has maintained an aligned policy or a neutral policy in today's society?
Yes, I think so. They, we've had two visits to Georgetown by two successive United States Secretaries of State. And President Ali has just had an audience with President Xi Jinping in China. Guyana has a consistent narrative. We're a country that has gone through very hard times. We have now had a windfall discovery of oil, and we are using that windfall to ensure we build up, agricultural, food security, energy security, climate security, that we strengthen and maintain democracy, and that we play a leading role in the world on some of these issues. We are a pioneering country when it comes to carbon credit. A lot of people are looking at us to see how we've done that, and looking at our progress we're making in a lot of other areas regarding economic and social conditions. So Guyana has a very impressive track record, and we have a very, very compelling narrative. And when President Ali speaks to these important leaders, there is a sort of meeting of the minds. And so what we can deduce from that is that these very powerful countries would like to engage with us in the areas that we're interested in, and vice versa. We are, of course, interested in them playing a role in our economy, going out there looking for investment from both, from all countries, the United States and China included. We're courting India as well, the Middle East. We make no exceptions. Brazil, everyone. So I think that to your question, whether we're being non-aligned, yes, we're being non-aligned. We're being multi-aligned, and we are attractive to other partners in the world. This is a very good thing. They're all willing to engage with us. We're willing to engage with them all, and that's a very positive development.
President Ali has been pushing three strong issues, which they are global issues, and that has propelled Guyana into the global arena. One is climate change, one is food security and energy security, and he's been considered, and somehow he's getting the big powers to listen to him. Do you think going forward, that should be action and steps Guyana should take?
Sorry, Dr. Rose, you broke up a little bit there, and I didn't get the question clearly.
No. Okay, I said President Ali has been pushing for the longest while three issues that he strongly believes in: climate change, food insecurity, and the other one is energy. And he has been saying that we have to reduce the Caribbean imports, which is $4 billion, by 25% by 2025. Now, Guyana is taking a leading role in doing this. Do you think the other CARICOM countries are following in Guyana's footsteps or President Ali's direction?
Well, it would appear so. The, the initiative by President Ali is actually a continuation of what was called the Jagdeo initiative that had been initiated by VP Bharat Jagdeo when he was president. And it is something that somehow, fell into abeyance or in the CARICOM organization, it looks like. And this is sort of a revival of that initiative. And it does appear as if it is getting more traction. We've seen a number of other CARICOM leaders come out strongly in support of it, notably the Prime Minister of Barbados, others as well. And I think that some of the statistics that are coming out of the region in terms of agricultural development are tending to show that there has been progress made under that initiative. This is what I see coming out in the press. So I think the answer to your question is yes.
With Guyana's huge oil reserves, do you think Guyana should expand its relationship with the Middle Eastern countries, Saudi Arabia, and Arab Emirates and those countries that have huge oil reserves as well?
Well, Guyana's goal in foreign relations should be to have, mutually rewarding relations with all countries and groups of countries. I think that the countries of the Middle East, they have a lot to offer. Some of the countries, they are very wealthy. They have they're developed in many areas in which Guyana can make use of technologically in their industries. Of course, as a young oil producing country, many of those countries are very experienced in the oil industry, in all facets of the industry. So that alone sets the basis for collaboration. So yes, the Middle East is an area that we need to engage, as we have been doing, as we have started to do. We've seen delegations come and try to get engaged in relations with Guyana in different areas. This is something that we should pursue.
I read an article recently in the paper, no, not the paper, it's in a magazine, where it was stated that Guyana is not only taking a leading role in CARICOM nations, but it's also taking a broader role in the Organization of American States, a widening hemisphere. What do you think is Guyana's role in the Organization of American States? What do you think it should be?
Well, the OAS has 4 pillars.
You hear me, Ambassador?
Yes, I heard the question. The
Ambassador?
OAS.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the OAS.
Yeah, we're hearing you loud and clear. We let the ambassador answer.
Okay.
Yeah, the OAS has 4 pillars under which it promotes relations among the countries of the hemisphere. There is integral development, which is social and economic development among the countries, and it covers, of course, countries of North, South, and Central America and the independent countries of the Caribbean. Everyone in that geographic space, with the exception of Cuba, is a member of the OAS. So integral development is one pillar. Another one is hemispheric security. And hemispheric security covers not only, terrorism, transnational organized crime, cybersecurity, but also the more newfangled threats to security, issues like climate change, the drug trade, natural disasters, and so on. So there's a lot to do there in terms of meeting these challenges in a collective way. So the OAS has a very important role to play. And it would be good if, as you say, Guyana is, taking a more active role in the Organization of American States. In addition to the two pillars of hemispheric security and integral development, the OAS has two other pillars. One being strengthening democracy or strengthening democratic governance. And the other one is human rights. So strengthening democratic governance or strengthening democracy, the OAS has the Inter-American Democratic Charter. And this is an instrument by which all the countries of the hemisphere subscribe to collaborate in strengthening their own internal democracy and also keeping an eye out on whether democracy is being maintained and strengthened in, collectively in the wider hemisphere. So there are a number of things that you could do under the Charter if a country's democracy is failing. In Guyana, in the question of strengthening democracy, the OAS also has what are called electoral observation missions. They go out when you have elections to monitor the elections. And they have played a very important role in Guyana. Over the years, these electoral observation missions are very highly trained, they're very experienced. So they would come into your country, weeks before the elections. They would monitor the campaign. On polling day, they would go out to the polling stations and have a look. And they would issue a report. And usually when the report from the OAS electoral observation mission is made, it's usually a definitive pronouncement on the validity or otherwise of those elections. And over the multiple election cycles in Guyana, those OAS electoral reports have served to validate the results of the elections, put a stamp of approval on the way the polling has been conducted, and have contributed to settling down and bringing in an atmosphere of calm among the electorate. This was in 2020, it had a similar effect, the OAS report. So, that is one very tangible way in which the OAS has strengthen Guyana's democracy. And that has been very important because of the contentious nature of our electoral process and because of the difficulties we've had with getting results of elections accepted here in Guyana. The other thing is human rights. That's the fourth and last pillar. And human rights, the OAS has a whole infrastructure dedicated to that. It's they have an Inter-American Commission on Human Rights and an Inter-American Court. We are not a member of the court, but we are participating in the commission. So by that means, if one party in Guyana is aggrieved over an issue, they can make a complaint. And while the court cannot operate to make a ruling or a decision, the commission can sit and make recommendations. And we've seen this happen right now recently with the Chinese landing issue. Some party went to the IACHR, the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, and they made some complaints about what was happening in the Chinese landing area. And the commission made some recommendations, as a result of which the government decided to send a fact-finding delegation into Chinese landing, and that issue is now playing out. So that's an example of the OAS system trying to strengthen human rights in Guyana. So if we are to step up our involvement and try to play a more active role in the OAS, that would be a very positive thing, both for strengthening relations in the hemisphere as well as for Guyana's image internationally.
Guyana appears to have very good relationship with India, with China, with the United States, with the organization of the European Union and the OAS. What about the Organization of African Unity, members of the 54 members of African nations? What do you think?
Well, I haven't heard much about our engagement with the AU, the African Union, but I do know that when Carl Greenwich was Minister of Foreign Affairs, he was talking about Guyana opening an embassy in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. And part of the reason for that was because the African Union was headquartered in Addis Ababa. And so by having a mission there, Guyana would have the facility of being able to meet on a regular basis with the delegations from African countries as they traverse Ethiopia to conduct their business there. I haven't heard anything further. I don't know. Mr. Greenwich is no longer minister, so I don't know where that idea has gone.
How important is the Commonwealth of Nations?
Well, the Commonwealth is very important. It's a very large organization. It has, about more than 60 members of all stripes, first
Mr. Ambassador, you hearing me?
Yes. Yes, I'm answering your question. Yeah, the Commonwealth has very important countries as members on very wide, diverse membership. And the Commonwealth plays a very important role in the Venezuelan claim, because on an annual basis, whenever the Commonwealth Secretary General, Commonwealth Heads of Government Conference, they would regularly issue in the communique support for the territorial issue. The Commonwealth also has a lot of cooperation programs where they provide assistance of various forms. So I think to your question, it's a very important organization.
Dr. Rose? Okay, I think we might have missed him. Ambassador, if you were to rank all the different organizations in the world, can you name the top 5, the one with the most influence, and then go down to maybe the first 5?
That's a bit difficult to do on the spot, but by far the most important would be the United Nations. Probably by sheer numbers after that, where Guyana is concerned, you'd have the Commonwealth, the OAS, because it's the premier body for consultation regionally. CARICOM would be right up there. It's difficult to place a fifth one, and organizations come and go. You've had the Association of Caribbean States, which has been in flux, playing an active role at times, not so active at other times. So it's kind of difficult to rank them from that point of view. But I think certainly the first 4 would be those 4.
With Latin America, the one with Latin Mercury, is it? How would you rank that one?
We have UNISOR. Again, that has been, going up and down according to the trends in the hemisphere. You have Mercosur. We are observers in Mercosur as well. And the UNISOR itself is devolved from an earlier organization that was called the Rio Group, in which Guyana had played a very active role. We've hosted summits of the Rio Group and UNASUR here in Georgetown. But those organizations have sort of gone, are on a downward trend, it would appear, right now.
I know you have left the Foreign Service, but in your contemporaries, when you were ambassador and representing Guyana, were there other colleagues that you look up to for advice? And if they were, who are some of those that you look towards for some guidance?
Well, Guyana has had a constellation of great diplomats, and I've looked up to them all. Sir Sridhar Ramphal, definitely. The ministers that I served under, I learned a lot from them all. We've had other diplomats, other colleagues in the service. I don't want to call names, but all of the persons that were senior to me, there's no one from whom you do not learn. And when I got to my postings, there were persons from other countries that you interacted with, ambassadors who were there for a long time, knew the lay of the land, could advise you on how things are done. And this happened in Venezuela, it happened in the United States. By the time I got into China, I had already had about 20 years experience in the service. So the boot was on the other foot, fellows used to come to me for advice by then. Yeah. But that's the way it works. I've benefited a lot, like in every undertaking, from those who preceded me. I've been lucky to stand on the shoulders of giants, and it has helped a lot.
And you have become one of those giants as well, Ambassador. In terms of communication with former ambassadors, former head of state, and so on, are you? And I know we had Ambassador Shamir here on his phone. He was showing us his phone, and you have all these contacts still there. What say Ambassador Bayney Karran?
Well, in the diplomatic service, it's not a field that is given to making friends very easily, because most guys are on rotation, after a 4-year cycle, between a 3 to 5 year cycle. So if you are in a position for a long time, like I was in Venezuela and the United States, you see a lot of people come and go. And your interactions with them are pretty fleeting. Professionally, yes, but, you don't really get a chance to develop strong, lasting friendships because of the nature of the job and because, people have different interests and so on. If you attempt to have similar interests with someone, then you cultivate a relationship. So I've maintained a few friendships from long standing, not many though. And heads of state, your relations with heads of state, while you might get to know them, tangentially, these guys have very, very busy lives, and it's difficult to develop a relationship with them outside of the normal, outside of the professional interaction that you have, which are usually very, very, very fleeting, because the nature of their schedules and their agendas, you see them at an official meeting and that's it.
If a current ambassador, high commissioner, or a consul general want to seek the advice from a former ambassador like you, the protocol requires them to go through the Foreign Service, or they can come directly to you for advice?
No, they can come directly. I am not an official of the, of the government, or they can just call me up.
Okay. I know you mentioned the Petrocarib deal out of Venezuela, which when you were there, that deal was negotiated. And I know you have a long accomplishment of achievement for Guyana at the diplomatic level. Can you tell us some of your major achievement that that you always recap and say, well, I did this for my country, and I'm so proud of that. What are some of those things will it be, Ambassador?
Well, an ambassador is a cog in a wheel within a much larger system. So when you go out there and you start working, you depend a lot on support from your headquarters, from the department in the ministry that's responsible for your country. When you are executing your programs, you work collegially together with the other members of your mission out there, and often you also have counterpart support from the counterpart organizations within the country, belonging to the country in which you were posted. So I would not rush to claim any personal accomplishments as such, because you're part of a system, you depend on the efforts of others and so on. But having had the opportunity to serve for a very long time, things happen during the course of the duration of your engagement. For instance, in China, I was there from 2016 to 2020. And in 2018, Guyana signed on to the Belt and Road Initiative, which is a very important instrument of policy for the Chinese government. Again, I cannot claim that was a personal accomplishment. The mission at the time did offer its views to headquarters on how the process was unfolding, and on what we thought were the pros, the points to be considered, and so forth. But I wouldn't claim that as a personal accomplishment. In the United States, there were a number of initiatives that took place during my time there. PEPFAR was one of them. This is a facility that was launched by President George Bush, the son, for AIDS relief for persons afflicted by AIDS in Guyana. I think that program is still going. The resumption of Peace Corps activities in Guyana, it had been used to take place a long time ago and then stopped. It was resumed while I was there. We had a number of cooperation programs. The DEA, I think they established an office here in Guyana while I was in the United States. Usually the bilateral cooperation with the U.S., though, is run through their embassy here. So the Guyanese embassy in Washington is not always fully in the loop. You would be kept informed, but not actively engaged in executing those programs. In the United States, there's also the OAS. Because of the length of time that I served, I was 13 years in the United States, 2003 to 2016. And so I had the opportunity to chair the Permanent Council and also serve as deputy chair of the Permanent Council of the OAS, which is the governing body of the OAS that conducts the business of the organization. It's the Council of Ambassadors that do the daily business of the OAS in between the general assemblies that take place annually. I also served as chairman of the Committee on Hemispheric Security, and I was put up to be a candidate for the position of Assistant Secretary General of the OAS in 2005. I think 2005. Guyana lost that election to Belize, but I was a candidate for the position of Assistant Secretary General. And because I spent 13 years, I became the most senior ambassador, and I became the Dean of the Diplomatic Corps of the OAS. So those were some of the things that happened there. I did a lot of work with the diaspora. the Guyanese diaspora in many throughout the United States, and I received a lot of commendations and for the work that the mission under my control did in diaspora relations, in terms of fomenting unity, propagating Guyanese culture among diaspora communities, tending to their consular affairs and needs, and so on. So those were some of the main highlights in the United States. With the United States, you work with the State Department as well as with the Congress. We did succeed in having some successes with congressional initiatives. At one time, we got the U.S. Congress to actually pass a resolution congratulating Guyana on its independence anniversary. I think that was the 45th anniversary. And this is something very uncommon for a small country like Guyana. This is something the U.S. Congress does only for very close allies and very important countries. So we were able to get it done with a lot of hard work, knowing how to orchestrate things. To do that, you have to work with both the Democrats and the Republicans, because you have to, it's a very polarized society out there. So these are some of the things that happened under my tenure. In Venezuela, as I said earlier in the program, I was awarded the Order for the Liberator in the first class because of what the Venezuelans saw as my role in strengthening relations between the two countries. So those were some of the main things. I also signed the Inter-American Democratic Charter for Guyana while I was in Venezuela. I'm the signatory for Guyana on that charter. So those are some of the main things. But again, I will not claim personal credit for any of it.
You're a very modest ambassador. Is there something that you wish you could have accomplished that was not done?
Well, it's difficult to say yes to a question like that, because again, the diplomatic process, it's an interactive process. You can only go as far as the other side is willing to go. If you're negotiating a trade agreement or something like that, or if you're negotiating a treaty to cooperate in whatever kind of an area, it is only, you cannot get further than the other side is willing to go. So, you have to bear in mind that in order to achieve progress, you have to sometimes lower your ambitions on the issue, just so that you can bring the other side on board with you. So I would not say that I don't look back on anything usually with regrets. So it's difficult to say that I wish this would have happened or that would have happened. Things can always be better, but one has to be satisfied.
Ambassador, before the rose comes on, if the government was to approach Ambassador Bayney Karran to take up one of the vacant posts around the world, will Ambassador Bayney Karran take up that offer?
Any request from the head of state is something that has to be considered very seriously. And, if there is a need somewhere, it is something that has to be given all due consideration. Having said that, I have left the field for, quite some time now, since 2020. After 24 years, I guess, of doing anything, there are not many challenges left. I've served in the main capitals of the world already, and I was not stimulated to perform as enthusiastically as I was in earlier times. So these are all things you have to consider. Like I said, if the government makes any kind of an approach, it is something that has to be considered. That doesn't necessarily mean I will say yes, but I would have to consider.
Thank you, Ambassador. Dr. Rose, you could say your question, then we'll close.
One final question, Ambassador. How important is the diaspora to Guyana, especially the New York diaspora, that has the largest contingency of Guyanese? I think it's 568,000.
Well, the diaspora is, it goes without saying it's very important. I think that every government in Guyana has come out with a declared policy of engaging the diaspora, of trying to ensure that the diaspora plays a part in national development. There have been a lot of initiatives over the years in different forms and fashions. Clearly, if we were to harness the skills available and the willingness, by the way, that's available in the diaspora to contribute to national development, some skills we are so short of and resources we are so short of at home, it would be a fillip to the development of Guyana. I don't think we have done this very successfully. There are different kinds of models that you can draw from. There are a lot of studies that have been done, including studies about the Guyana diaspora, by the way. But there are, the Israelis have a good model, the Mexicans have a good model. You find countries like India and China who have made progress when they were on the economic upsurge in getting people abroad to come back and help out, develop their economy. Diaspora communities normally have a certain attitude to governments, and this is not to do with Guyana. It's irrespective of which country you're from. They tend to mistrust governments. That's the first thing. And they tend to feel unappreciated, that their efforts are not being recognized. Like I said, it doesn't matter which country you're from. Governments, on the other hand, have their own reservations. Diaspora communities tend to underestimate the difficulties that governments have in dealing with them. The whole issue of being able to coordinate receipts of donations from a wide variety of sources, at a wide variety of times and different kinds of donations and so on. The whole process of engaging the diaspora, which is such a disparate group, it poses challenges that not many governments are able to solve in an effective way. I think that we need to be able to address those kinds of issues. Bear in mind, too, that, let's face it, Guyana is a very polarized society. So that when you have one particular political entity holding office, you do have supporters of that other side who feel, excluded from what's going on. Whether that's an accurate feeling or not, it exists. That's the point. So we have a lot to do. I think we can look at some more models and come up with some more, solutions. I think what's encouraging is that for the first time, Guyana now has a diaspora unit within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It's headed by a dynamic lady, Rosalinda Rasool. We also have in the ministry not only a foreign minister, but a foreign secretary. It appears as if Foreign Secretary Robert Bassad is taking the lead on diaspora issues. So what we have now is, for the first time, we have a structure. This was something that did not exist back when I was serving in the United States. We just had a desk officer, not a unit, not a structure. And this is something very good to build upon. And one does hope that this would lend to a more active, beneficial engagement on the part of the diaspora, as you say in New York, which is the focus. But we have a lot of other diaspora groups elsewhere.
One final. The late Dr. Roger Luncheon, a stalwart in the PP party, will be buried tomorrow. I think tonight is his wake. I should be headed out there right after I finish here. Do you have any comments on him? Do you have anything to say about the Roger Luncheon, whom we call Papa?
Well, Dr. Luncheon, I knew before I knew him as a medical doctor, and then of course in politics. And when he was head of the presidential secretariat, we did interact work-wise. He was also the person responsible for my contracts with the government. He was a doctor to my family. He tended to my father in his last days, and so my relationship with him was quite, it was a personal one, and his passing has deeply touched me. I did go to the function they had last, I think Friday it was, and I do intend to participate tomorrow as well. So all I can say is that Guyana has lost a truly great individual, a man who has made immense contributions. I don't think that his contributions, they're so wide and profound, I don't think they can really be fathomed, in all their aspects. So I think the only thing I can say is condolences to his family, his relatives, his friends and associates in the PPP, and it has touched me at a personal level, and I'm deeply sorry to see it go.
Thank you. Charles?
Ambassador, we want to thank you so much for spending your evening with us. I know you have a busy time ahead of you, but anything in closing?
Well, I would just like to thank you for having me on the program. I think it was quite a stimulating discussion, notwithstanding the technical difficulties. I want to congratulate you, gentlemen, on putting foreign policy on the, bringing it to the public, public knowledge. I think it's an important topic. I think it's has some mysteries to it. That shouldn't be. But thank you for opening up this discussion, and I hope that the audience was able to benefit from the discussion. So I just want to wish everyone a happy evening, and all your viewers a very peaceful night. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. It's Dr. Rose. It was his intuition to have foreign policy as part of our discussion. We had Ambassador Charandas, High Commissioner Charandas, Ambassador Shamir Ali, and now we have you again. And we hope we can have maybe some other ambassadors in our future program. So thank you so much again, Ambassador. Dr. Rose, anything in closing?
I'm hoping to have the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Trinidad next week, hoping. I have to give him a call tomorrow. Thank you, Ambassador, and I apologize for the poor service, the interruptions we had with the internet. And this is why it will continue to call for better internet service in Guyana. In the rural areas of the country, with quarantine, internet, you can't even talk on the phone for a minute. Not even a minute, 10 seconds, internet goes off. Why is this happening still in Guyana? It's a simple solution to the internet system. 2, I'm also calling for retirement age to increase as normal from 55 to 62. Up to last week, a second cousin of mine retired as a nurse. She's 55. And she's heading to England. England took her. She's going to England. We're losing our people with the best experience and knowledge at that age at 55 to public servant. To at least, as my colleague Charles say, $200,000 a month. At least, because cost of living is very, very high. I'm here in Guyana and I'm seeing it every day. I run out of money right now. I can't live anymore. So I have to rush back to the States. That's how cost of living is high in Guyana. So I thank our audience for listening. I thank you, Ambassador, and let's hope that we can do a better job in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rose. And as Ambassador Bayney Karran says, we also want to extend our condolences to the family of Dr. Luncheon, here from Globespan 24/7. We know he was a stalwart to Guyana. He's a great son of Guyana, and may his soul rest in eternal peace. Again, to our audience, we want to thank you for being with us, to Nohar Singh and to Ryan Gobin. Thank you so much. Ambassador, thank you again. And God bless our great